Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you like this episode, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment or two, then subscribe and click on the bell to receive notifications of whenever we release new videos. Also, please remember to share them to your social media. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to Grand Prairie, Alberta, Canada. This area is covered with broad oat fields ringed by enormous rolling forests of quaking aspen, European mountain ash, poplar, and elder trees. Beneath this emerald canopy, bushes like serviceberry, raspberry, chokecherry, and dogwood display their beautiful flowers and offer sugary treats to birds and animals alike. Along the ground, stunning arrays of wild sunflowers and oxeye daisies dance in the prairie breezes. The elevation of this land undulates in the lower 2,000-foot range, and seasons are dramatic, with hot, dry summers and cold, snowy winters. Game animals here are plentiful and diverse. Moose, elk, pronghorn antelope, bison, as well as white-tailed deer and mule deer meander along the edges of fields. The predators in this area include bobcats, coyotes, and wolves. With this abundance of game and berry options for food, black bears and brown bears are thriving. On August 12, 2007, 32-year-old Chris McLellan relocated to Grand Prairie from Poplar, Nova Scotia with his wife and son. The newlywed landed a job as a welder and was an avid outdoorsman. One of his favorite activities was bow hunting, and Grand Prairie was a great spot to do it. On August 15, 2007, Chris decided to go out scouting for archery season by himself. He decked himself out in full-body camouflage, including a face mask, so that animals might not see him as he scouted. McLellan drove onto Range Road 73 to a farmer's oat field, about 12 kilometers south of the small town of Grovedale, blissfully unaware of just how much excitement and danger this day had in store for him. The archery hunter spent a few hours glassing the fence rows and assessing his odds of success. He began to work his way back toward his vehicle about 9:30 p.m. Chris hadn't packed bear spray, nor was he carrying a firearm on his trip. His only form of self-defense was a hunting knife, with a 12-inch long blade and a digital camera. Just before dusk, Chris was walking through a field that had a small knoll in the middle. He was approaching the knoll when he noticed a huge grizzly bear standing to her feet, only 60 yards away from him. Somehow the knoll had been just high enough to screen the bear from Chris's view and him from hers. Chris's knees immediately began to knock as fear overwhelmed him as soon as he saw the sow's two cubs poke their heads up to see what the sow was looking at. He was way too close to her to be comfortable and hoped she would catch his scent on the breeze and disappear, but the sow had other plans. Now there had been a real dilemma developing between area farmers and grizzly bears around Grand Prairie. It seemed the hungry bears loved filling themselves up on the delicious oats from the farmers' fields. Fish and Game officers had recently flown over the area in a helicopter and noted seeing 7 grizzly bears in the 4 to 5 square kilometers around the field Chris was scouting. Locals reported finding piles of grizzly bear scat loaded with digested oats, affirming that the bears were raiding the fields to augment their diets. As soon as Chris saw the sow stand to her hind legs, he knew he didn't want to confuse her about what he was. He immediately ripped his face mask off so that she could see he was a human and not a deer or some other delicious animal. The terrified man lifted his arms straight over his head and waved them around frantically as he yelled at her, hoping this display might frighten her away. Right when Chris began to yell, the sow dropped to all fours and began to charge straight toward him. She had apparently seen enough to make a decision on how to handle his close presence to her and her cubs. He was hoping she would veer off or slow down, as he knew there was no way he could outrun her. His only option was to wait and see if she was bluffing, or if her intentions toward him were much more serious. As the grizzly ran toward him, her head was high, and her eyes focused like lasers on Chris. He knew she was not bluffing, and that the outcome of this run-in would be bad. The sow huffed and chuffed her way toward him like some kind of locomotive with teeth. Chris lifted the digital camera he was carrying, hoping the flash would startle her and make her reconsider her options. When the flash didn't go off, he knew the only other weapon he had to defend himself was his hunting knife. Chris lifted his knife above his head and braced for impact. The sow slammed into his gut at full speed, sending him flying backward and his arms flailing to maintain his balance. As his arms reached out, the sow clamped her jaws onto his right forearm, just between his wrist and his elbow. Her momentum drove the bear right through Chris and wrapped him around her neck and shoulders with the impact. Whether it was an act of deliberation or desperation, Chris plunged his hunting knife into the sow just in front of her shoulder at the base of her neck. The blade sank into her flesh clear to the tang, and blood sprayed in every direction. Chris recalled feeling a sudden sensation of warmth all over his body as the grizzly's blood drenched him from his head to his toes. The sow then turned her head and bit into his back. Before she could pull away from him, Chris plunged his hunting knife into her flesh 2 more times in quick succession. After the impact, Chris was lying on the ground, waiting for the next painful bite from the sow, when she turned around and walked away. He could see blood pouring from the huge wounds his hunting knife had opened up in her neck, but was more worried about getting to safety than anything else. The wounded man kept his eyes down to avoid instigating a follow-up attack. Chris cupped his clearly mangled right arm to his body as he quickly made his way toward the edge of the field and away from that angry sow. It only took a few minutes before Chris could find a farmer, who immediately dialed 911 to request medical help. First responders from the Grovedale Fire and Rescue rendered first aid as they transported him to the nearest hospital. At the medical center, Chris's arm was x-rayed and found to have both the radius and ulna bones severely broken. One of the nerves that controlled his hand had been damaged as well. Surgery was required to insert metal plates to repair the damage done to his arm bones and start him on the road to recovery. As for the sow, she was found dead only 30 yards from where her dust-up with Chris had occurred. There was no indication of what had happened to her cubs, nor their age. If they were spring cubs, they would stand no chance of survival without her, and only a slightly higher one if they were from the prior spring. Reflecting on the mishap, Chris says that he was lucky, and acknowledged the bear could have inflicted much more damage on him in the first few moments of the attack. Different scenarios still flash through his mind, as being at the wrong place at the wrong time and running into the wrong bear continues to haunt him. An outfitter who lives in the area, Dave Coleman, reported spotting the sow and her cubs only a few days before Chris's attack. He expressed admiration in Chris's ability to stay calm and cool in such a desperate situation. Chris indicates that he will bow hunt again after his arm is repaired and rehabilitated fully. He still deals with just how lucky he was, and how things could have ended up very differently for him. This episode reminds me of Jeremy Evans and Gene Moe's attack, which are both episodes on this channel. All 3 episodes featured victims who were tough beyond measure. Which of these 3 do you think was the most amazing bear attack? Post your answers in the comments section. After reviewing the details of this attack, I'm left with a few questions for you. Was Chris just lucky in stabbing the bear in the perfect spot during the attack? Would you consider a hunting knife with a 12-inch blade a good grizzly bear deterrent? How many things can you list that Chris did wrong in the lead-up to the attack? I'll be glad to read and reply to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it.
Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider clicking on the like button and clicking on the bell icon. We'll help you know when we post our new episodes. Posting our video links to your social media profiles furthers awareness, and it's fun. We slashed our prices in our merch store, linked below, so check out the bargains there while you shop. As a member of our human community, remember to adventure bravely and be careful out there, especially in bear country.